Hi, I'm Ryan Davis, here today to talk to you about Pokemon Colosseum. The popularity of Pokemon isn't nearly as feverish as it was in its heyday of the late 90s, but the series still has some spark in it, which is thanks largely to the sustained quality of the perennial pairs of Pokemon games for the Game Boy platform. As the successor to the Pokemon Stadium games, Colosseum pretty much gives fans what they want. Lots of really freaky looking monsters and lots of fighting. The story in Pokemon Colosseum revolves around a teenage boy who has stolen technology that gives him the ability to snag Pokemon from their trainers right in the heat of battle, and a young girl who has the ability to see the aura of Shadow Pokemon. Together, they work to capture and cure these Shadow Pokemon and stop the group responsible for actually creating the Shadow Pokemon in the first place. Though you'll spend time running around the world having conversations with various characters to move the story along and buying the occasional piece of Pokemon-related gear, the meat of the game remains in the fighting. The combat should feel pretty familiar for Pokemon fans, though the big twist in Colosseum is that you can now have two Pokemon in play at the same time, which adds a bit more strategy. You won't find any wild Pokemon in Pokemon Colosseum, which was your primary source for new Pokemon in previous games. So the only way to increase the size of your roster is to snag Shadow Pokemon from the trainers you fight with. Shadow Pokemon differ from the regular variety in that they only have one attack, and your Shadow Pokemon will take damage every time it attacks. You can eventually turn a Shadow Pokemon into a regular Pokemon, which makes them a whole lot more useful, but the process is really a pain, and you'll probably end up using the two non-Shadow Pokemon you start the game with a whole lot. The game's still pretty fun, but it probably would appeal more to fans if the structure was a more traditional Pokemon game. Outside the story mode, there's a multiplayer battle mode for up to 4 players, and you can also import monsters from Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. So the visual style in the Pokemon games has been getting stranger and stranger over the years, and it appears that the whole thing has just gone off the deep end in Colosseum. As usual, many of the Pokemon look downright hallucinatory, but the people that populate the world of Colosseum, who have previously, in past Pokemon games, they kind of look like anime versions of regular suburban kids, but now they are just freakishly over-stylized. And despite their rather deranged costumes, though, the character models look pretty decent, if not a little bit stiff when in motion. A lot of the game's environments are kind of bland and boxy, and this really shows off the game's N64 roots. But the best part of Pokemon Colosseum are the Pokemon themselves, which really look better than they ever have. If you're a Pokemon freak, great-looking monsters and the slick battle effects will make it much easier to forgive many of Colosseum's other visual shortcomings. There's nothing so impressive in the sound department, though. All of the dialogue is delivered through subtitles, and the Pokemon are generally pretty quiet, which is really rather disappointing. There's some decent music, though there are several occasions where what you're hearing clashes with what you're seeing. It's more fully realized than either of the Pokemon Stadium titles, but it's also not that much different either. Still, if you're a fan, you'll probably want to pick up Colosseum just for the improved visuals. You can still have fun if you're not already committed to the world of Pokemon, though it's probably not the best introduction to the franchise for novice players.